right, real quick before we start talking about the webcast, a little marketing slide out. First of all, about ITS Partners, we are based in beautiful Grand Rapids, Michigan. We are a national partner of Symantec, along with a platinum partner. Partner of the Year in 2005, 2007, and 2011. 3 expert competencies within the Symantec Partner Program. And as you can see, we work with all of the different areas and verticals within the company. So let's go ahead and start jumping into really why you're here. First of all, my name is Jonathan Jesse, and we're going to be talking about who really owns the critical data within your organization. My email is is on the slide, so if you want to send me email questions directly, that's fine as well. Once again, as we have questions, feel free to submit those into the GoToWebinar portion within your slide. So what we're going to cover today, so the agenda for this webcast. Talk very briefly about the problem, why you guys are here. Then I'm going to offer up a solution, which will be Symantec Data Insight. Once we cover that, I will walk through a demonstration of Symantec Data Insight, how that looks, how it can answer some of the questions that we pose, and then finally, how can ITS help? So first, the first problem, or the problem that we're here to solve, is that there is a massive explosion of information. This exponential increase in data makes information management and protection a real challenge. So, struggles that organizations often have are what data exists out there. Where is it stored? Is it all on my NAS? Is it on a bunch of Windows file shares? Is it other locations that I don't know? Once I struggle, or the second struggle is, who owns that actual data? Is it people that are no longer with the organization? Is it flagged incorrectly? How do I know who owns that data? So I can go to Joe or Steve or Janice and say, hey, look, you guys need to clean up this data. It either is stale data, it is old data, or it contains confidential data that we need to track. A third problem that organizations often struggle with is, how is that data being used? So is Sally or Steve or Matt, are they using an inordinate amount of data? Do we even know how much data Matt uses from a day-to-day point of view? Or Chad uses a lot of data this 1 week. Is it because he was on vacation? Is it because he's slurping data to leave? Is there a way that we can figure out and track that data that's being used? An additional problem that Data Insight is going to help us answer is this gap between the IT and the business owners. So you, as a member of the IT organization, are tasked with governance, risk reduction, and need to know, first of all, what that data is, where it is, but more importantly, how to leverage all your existing data control policies. So we don't allow confidential data stored on the drive, or we don't allow data that is older than 3 years stored within our network. How do we go out and validate all of these policies that we have set up? This gap is further demonstrated when we talk about, the business owner knows the value of that data. They know that this folder contains everything on our top secret project, Project Batman, and that it needs to be locked down, but IT security and IT operations often doesn't know what that real data is. To them, it might just be a folder or a set of data. We're going to try and help solve some of those problems. So how bad is your data really? Is that data consuming valuable storage space? We have a bunch of files that haven't been accessed in 6 years, but every night they're backed up. Can we offload that into cold storage? Can we delete that data? What do we need to do with this massive explosion of data and file shares? Can we stay current with that data growth and trends? Do you know, first of all, how much space is being consumed on your filers? And secondly, do you have any trending or growth analysis around that? So I've got 17 terabytes of data. When will that exceed the amount of free space that I actually have? I've asked this question again. Where does that confidential data exist on the network? Do we know? Do we have the capability to find those file shares? Here at ITS, we have a group drive. I think it's called the G drive. Is that a drive that has all kinds of stuff that shouldn't be stored on it? Is there a public folder that has become a swamp or a marshland of different folders and groups and permissions and all kinds of stuff that probably shouldn't be on that? How do I know who's using that data? I've asked that question earlier, but want to restate it again. Is Matt using data that he shouldn't have? Well, Matt was in a position that gave him access to this folder, and he's transitioned to another department. How do I make sure that I've removed his permissions and his entitlements off of that engineering folder, and now he's in HR or something like that? And then finally, the last two questions: can we trend down data growth, and is that confidential information at risk? So all kinds of questions, problems about the data that we need help answering. So the solution, right? So classify our data. We're going to talk about how to discover that confidential data and identify data owners and data uses. Through Data Insight, we can help answer who's the actual owner of that data to make sure that it is Joe who is the owner versus maybe somebody else marked in Active Directory, or Windows file shares gives me an orphan SID or something like that. We can identify all of that information and empower you to help go back to the business units and help clean things up. Not only can we do this, but we can do this in an automated way that allows for that ongoing discovery, ongoing understanding of what is being used in our environment. So once we've classified our data, we can then treat that information like currency through better information management. We can prioritize information protection. We can target specific folders for maybe a DLP product, or make sure that our security is set at that file level or that share level on these specific folders because they're more important to us. It allows us to prioritize where we spend time from an information, a data security point of view. So how do I know who's using my data? Some more things about Symantec Data Insight. Oftentimes, when I start looking at data ownership, I have one of three options. I have an orphan SID, somebody that's no longer there, is still marked as the data owner. The built-in administrator is flagged in, built-in/administrator is flagged as the data owner. Maybe the guy who copied all of the files from a file share when you replace the server is the data owner. Symantec Data Insight, by tracking who is using that file or folder, can assign data ownership to it. So I know that Sally uses this folder within the human resources folder, and she uses those files every day. Let's flag Sally as the owner of that file. So now I can go back to Sally and say, look, is this really a problem? Or is this really something that needs to be out there? And it allows us to manage that information. Data Insight provides that starting point for dealing with data at rest in a DLP point of view. When we start talking to our customers around data at rest, data that is in the file storage portion of things, oftentimes the customer will say, you know, Jonathan, I just don't know where to start. I have 72 different file shares on this one server alone. Which one of those contains the keys to the kingdom, or should I target first? Well, let's take a look at who's actually using that data. Is it all stale data, or is it data that we need to clean up or to remediate? Once we get that starting point through Data Insight, not only can we discover that confidential data, but we can leverage Network Protect, a part of the data at rest, and we can automate cleanup or remediation of things. But once again, the question is, where do I start? And Data Insight is going to answer that for us. Another question that I get asked a lot, how do I know that Joe is using more data than normal? The scenario is that I think that a user is getting ready to leave the company, or is interacting with the system more than they need to, or they have access to more files than they should. Once again, by reading the filer logs, we can calculate data usage by a user. So I know that Joe uses X amount of data per week. I can then create an alert based on a deviation of normal file access. So now that alerts me to that Joe is consuming more data off of my filers than normal. Let's go ahead and talk with Joe, or maybe investigate Joe. Joe, have you been on vacation for a week? Are you looking at things that you shouldn't be? Did your work task list change? Let's try and figure this out. This next bullet point is key for storage reclamation. Am I wasting disk space on stale data or data types I shouldn't have on the network? We can run various reports showing data aging and specific file types. So for example, am I storing a lot of virtual machines or movies or MP3s or other file types that I shouldn't be storing, A, on my network, and B, backing up and consuming disk space, tape space, drive space, backing up that data that I shouldn't be. So I can now provide data aging. These 17 file folders haven't been accessed in the last 3 years. What does my data retention policy say? And I can also run a separate report that says, give me all of the, break it all down by file types. So VNDK files, large CAD drawings, etc. And this allows us to either, my storage admins, to clean up either drives or backups or provide more disk space. Once again, Data Insight is providing an understanding of what's happening with my data. It's peeking under the covers of my filers to give me some of that information and access. Well, all right, Jonathan, you said that Data Insight is awesome, and it's going to answer all of these questions and provide all of these solutions. Well, cool. How does it actually work? And we'll talk our way through the items that we see on this screen as a part of the demo. But the main key point is that there is a management console that we'll access through a web page. And that is going to work with a combination of indexers and collectors to read the file system logs. So what does that mean? So from an example, on a filer like a NetApp or an EMC system, we can read the logs of that filer to see exactly what is happening. And same thing for SharePoint or for a Windows file share. That allows us to understand read, write, those types of access things, file creation, data usage, on top of providing that inventory of all of the systems. So at a high level, my collector will grab the information off of my filers, process that, send that into my indexers, which will put that all together in a way that through the management console that I can see. We can set those up for incremental scans and full scans, to help be flexible and understand, not affect your environment. So once again, so Data Insight is going to scan the filer's logs to help pull in all of that information that I have talked about already. And we'll see how that looks like in a demo. Just in my demo environment, I'll have Windows file shares. We talked a little bit about how DI works, Data Insight works. Let's go ahead and show you how it works. So let me flip Windows here for just a second. And as you can see, I am at a prompt for my username and password. So let's go ahead and log in. Make sure that I remember my password for my demo account. And when I log in, it brings me back to the last page that I was looking at. So let's start from the beginning. As you can see on top, I have these different tabs. Click on a dashboard, and it's going to allow me to get to an overview of the filers that I have set up. So you can see that I have 3 filers that I scanned. You can see the shares that I have, the size on disk, open file shares, and then since this is integrated with Symantec DLP, it's also referencing my DLP policies that have been implemented and used. We can break that down a couple of ways. We can get different reports, show you the last time it was scanned and my last activity, all of my shares. We can take a look at the security on here. A lot of different reports that we can get as an overview of the different filers that I have set up. But this isn't the important stuff. The important stuff is under this workspace tab. So go ahead and click on this workspace, and you can see the 3 filers that I have set up. And I'll get to how I am managing those in just a minute. You can also see my users and my groups within my domain. Couple of things. I'm going to start at the folder level, and then we'll jump into the users levels and how that works. So I have my domain controller that has a bunch of file shares on there that are set up and have different items run on it. So if I click on security, you can see the information that is generated by this filer. So at a brief overview, I get who created the file, last accessed, last modified, and then some files that are on the system. But more important stuff is when we start drilling into activities and understanding who is using this. So I can filter this out by the last 6 months, month to date, quarter to date, those types of items. And it's kind of boring. I've got mostly my one user, Jonathan or Jesse is using the system. I've got the administrator is using the file system as well. Good question on the custodian. We'll get there in just a minute, Dave. I'll explain that. Thanks for sending that into the question area. And the inferred owner, based on read and write count, is the administrator. I set this up. I put all of the files and all of the reads. So based on the use of that is my administrator account. And typically, I would set up a share as administrator, but we can see in this case I did. It also gives us the folder activity, broken down by read, write, and other. Current year to date shows me a lot. Let's go ahead and take a look at the current month to date. And you can see that yesterday I spent a lot of time working with my demo account, and that we can go ahead and drill into it, and it starts providing us with information. Folder activity, pretty boring, it's just Jonathan, but that's who's using the system. Next, we can take a look at the permissions. What are the permissions on this folder? Well, I have the administrators group that has full control. I have this engineering group that has full control. And I can also see who are the members of my engineering group because I have imported that information into Active Directory. So this allows me to understand who is actually using the file. And there are some recommendations that I can then make. So these 2 people have not accessed my folders ever. And so I could either remove them from that engineering group, or maybe I could remove the engineering group from having permissions from this share. Just some recommendations that I could make and change what's happening within that file share. As the usage gets, data gets populated, this social map will get populated, and it's actually pretty boring right now because there's only one person, and it's zoomed way in, connected to this share. But if I had a share with a lot of use, I would be able to see in a connected way, okay, Jonathan Jesse has access to this file share. He also has access to these other file shares. Perhaps we need to clean up the file shares that Jonathan has access and permissions to. So you can see that Data Insight, and I've changed the share here, gives us pretty granular access to what's going on with the system. And if I back up my file share for the whole year, you can see that one person over the last year has accessed this file share, good old Matt, and he's the one that has done all of the accessing to it. So what have we answered so far? We've answered who's using the files, what that, and who has permissions and access to that file share. So a couple of questions have come in, so let's pause real quick here. So right now, one of the questions is how often should that information be checked? So how often should these filer logs be read and passed over to the Data Insight server? So most organizations that I work with do this weekly on their main filers, but if there are file shares or other folders that don't get used a lot, then we can set those scans and updates, maybe quarterly, every other week, those types of things, once a month, based on our understanding once we know who's using these files and who's using these folders. So I'm going to change to the user view. This is all coming in from my domain, my Active Directory. And if I click on myself, you see all of this beautiful information from Jonathan. A couple of things. First of all, you can see that I messed up in the attribute population. And I put in the wrong value in AD to populate my name. But you can also see that I'm a member of a lot of groups. Are there things that could be cleaned up within the system that perhaps Jonathan should have a membership in? So there's a couple of questions about custodian. So custodian is the person who is the owner and the person that should be managing a specific folder. In Data Insight 4.5, we have the ability to also set up a self-service portal that will allow the custodian to clean up and to remediate some of the events within a file share automatically. So Jonathan and myself, I am currently not assigned any custodial use of those I have two. I have two file shares that I have been assigned custodian to. So, excuse me, I am custodian. I have to manage and I have to set those up. Custodian can be calculated automatically, or it can be assigned within the Data Insight console. You can also see all of the beautiful activity that I have done working on this file share. You can see that it's been pretty heavy within the last couple of days as I get set up to do this demo. And you can see exactly what I have been doing by time or by folder within the system. You can see that I've renamed a folder, that I've cleaned things up, etc. My permissions, everything that I have for all of the files that I have access to within the data, in the filers that I am managing with Data Insight. And we can dig in and take a look at audit logs of what's changed, what Jonathan has done, and really drill in and get an understanding of what's happening to our system. Well, that's all good, Jonathan. Thanks for showing me all of this information that I can get from my filer. By clicking into it, are there things that I can get out? How do I share reports? How do I customize reports? So let's jump into reports. So there's a group of reports that I have set up already, and I have run these reports several times. As you can see, we have a group of reports, talks about permissions and aging of our data, talks about duplicate files, consumption by department, etc. DQL is a query against the data that Symantec DLP has, and we can write queries based on what we're consuming. Our data custodian summary, our ownership that's inferred, filer growth, filer trending, those types of things, along with access details. So let's take a look at my consumption by department. We'll go ahead and kick that into a PDF, and that allows us to have departments set up. Now, I don't think I have everyone's. You're right. I don't have everyone's department configured within Active Directory, but if that was part of my demo, it would break this out by access for the department. So let's take a look at perhaps a better report. Right, so consumption by owner. Now I can go to these people and say, whoa, Mr. Wyatt, you have consumed a large number of data. Let's go ahead and take a look at this 1.57 gigs worth of data that is stored on the network, why that is there, what we need to clean up. And as you can see, I click on Mr. Wyatt, I get access to all of the files and folders that are in the system, and then we can. So there's a comment in here that this seems very Windows-centric. So it's Windows-centric because that's what I have set up in my demo environment. The question would be, what type of Unix filers are you running? Is it more? Are your filers actually something like a NetApp or an EMC filer? Feel free to send me an email. We can have a further discussion on how your Unix and Linux filers are set up, and we can go from there. We can talk later about that. So once again, this is just a report that covers how much file use, the last time it was accessed, the last modified, broken out by that specific user. And we can take a look at trending as well. I've got nothing here because this report has not been run yet. Kind of boring, but as you can see, this would allow me to provide something to my storage admins from a capacity and a startup period, end of period, that growth, utilization, and usage growth. All of those types of reports that can help me with my my data owners or my storage admins to help chart and trend that file. As we continue on with Data Insight, let's take a look at the settings and how we have things set up. From a system overview point of view, you can see that I have one of my nodes are not connected, and I can drill in to that. I can also take a look at the history of my scans. You can see that it's been a while. I did some scans yesterday, but before that it was a couple of months back. You can see the filer type and whether they're healthy or not. It allows me to understand exactly what's happening within my organization and what's going on. If I click on the scanning over here from a health point of view, it's going to break this down into a couple of other charts. I can see my status of scans, when they last run, anything that's in process or from a history point of view. Really, this is getting me to understand what's happening within that particular filer. All right, let's talk about filers. How do we set those up? Well, from a filer point of view, there are a couple of ways that we can manage that filer. So when I click on Add New Filer, it allows me to specify a specific type, whether that's my Windows file share, an EMC filer, a NetApp filer, or of the Veritas file system. I can also scan a filer within SharePoint, as that's down lower. But let's go ahead and just, once again, Windows, because that's what my demo account is set up. If this is a clustered file server, I would specify it here. Server 1.itslab.cloud. And then I can specify specific credentials. So in this case, my Data Insight Administrator account, domain admin, it doesn't have to be. We need to be able to manage this. And then there's a couple of ways that we can test or monitor this. On a Windows box, we can set it up via an agent or agentless monitoring. If we are in agentless monitoring, we will not be able to scan all of the file system events. In this case, I am going to use an agent. We'll let Data Insight manage that agent and all of my information, and it's going to run as the local system. And I want, anytime a new share gets added, I want to scan that immediately. Now, because Data Insight is managing this target, when I hit save, it would go ahead and push out the Data Insight agent to that Windows share. Let's go ahead and cancel this because that server does not exist. If I were going to add, say, a NetApp filer, there's different things that I need to do. All right, so the filer host name or IP address. If this is a virtual filer, I'm going to monitor CIFS and NFS filing. All right, I can drill that down. All of the different item events via my F policy, I can set that up and monitor it that way. Once again, this is using the filer logs and not the NetApp filer information instead of pushing an agent out to that device. And the same thing would be true if I were to set up an EMC filer. It's going to use, if I remember correctly, it's going to use the Kava agent on my EMC filer, and it would pull in the information there. You can see that I can set that up to monitor shares and go and provide information for that. Once I have my filer set up, and give me just a second to close my tabs, you can see that I can specify my SharePoint stuff, directory, permissions, but what we really want to get down into is the custodian manager, where I can assign those by either a specific method or by CSV. I can specify specific data retention policies for my Data Insight system to allow me to manage data disk space. And then finally, if I am leveraging data loss prevention from Symantec and you don't, we can integrate the two solutions. As you can see, I'm connecting to my DLP server via a username, and I am passing that information over to my DLP system. So now DLP and Data Insight are communicating. If I had a DLP incident, let's go ahead and flip over to that, log in. You can see that when I take a look at a network discover incident, that I may have items that have the built-in /administrator as the file owner. Because I am integrating with Data Insight, we can populate that information into the system. So because that I have the file owner showing as built-in /administrators, I can pull that information into as the data owner. And currently, I do not have that working yet, but all of that information can be passed from Data Insight into the system, along with all kinds of custom attributes from Data Insight. You can populate that into the system as well. Flip back over to Data Insight here. From a policy point of view, so I've walked through the dashboard, which is an overview. I've walked through the workspace, which is the meat and potatoes of things, and my reporting and my settings. I can set up policies based on activity. So let's take a look at this policy here. So I'm going to say if a particular user deviates from a policy, what do we do? So configure a policy. Over the last 4 weeks, we're going to allow a deviation of 2 times standard deviation for user access on my domain controller. Got it all selected here. And we're going to monitor my Active Directory groups. So if anybody in these policies will deviate from their standard usage, what do? Well, we need to send an email out. And then that will generate an alert notification that, Matt Reed has consumed more data than he should. And he's deviated, by a 2x standard deviation. So these policies, we can also add a data activity that specific information happened on a specific folder. So if there was a policy, or sorry, a high sensitivity, a high priority folder, we can monitor access for that particular folder and then send out an alert and notification. Data Insights providing that information and providing our answers. So so how do I know who's using my system? We walked through and found the calculated data owner of the system based on who's using the file the most. That allows us to then be able to contact the data owner, whether that's a specific business unit or not. Data Insight, as we've seen, shows us that starting point to do my DLP network discover scans, and can also populate data from the system into my DLP console. We can also know if somebody is using more policies or more data than normal. We showed that deviation or user deviation policy. And we also took a look that we can run different reports to show different data aging or different amounts of specific files. As we wrap up, so what? You sat through this webcast. How can ITS help you out? First of all, if you have questions, send me an email, jjesse@itsdelivers.com. We'll work on getting back to you on that. We can give you a trial or a proof of concept of Data Insight and Symantec DLP. Health checks both for DLP and Data Insight if you currently have the system and need some help. Various implementations and managed services. So here we are. Contact us at any of these areas. This will be on our YouTube page probably within the end of the week. If you have any questions that would like to be covered via an email, send us an email, drop us a note. I'm going to thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this webcast. I hope you have a great rest of the day.